our healthcare. We are our doctors. We are our medicine people. Our medicine people are so far advanced in our healing knowledge and even our spiritual healing on people. And this is what, through the Native Youth Movement, through the resistance movement, bringing back within our communities. And everybody here that comes to this university leaves their communities and comes here to get education. I know a lot want to go back to help their communities, and we have to say, okay, how are we going to help our communities? How are we going to help just the local issues right here, like Imperial Metals up there and how's it, like around that area, Tofino area. That's a big fight that's happening now. They want to start building on their traditional territories. We need resources. People want to build homes on their territories. They need gas money to get out there. There's like a lot of resources that need to be got for this resistance movement. And this is how people too in the cities can help out and spread the word. Like one of the elders at the Pancakes Not Pipelines in Squamish, she was like, you all could tell 10 more people. And then those 10 people can tell more 10 people. And that's how we start the revolution. And she was also the one that stood up and she told everybody, we need to warrior up. And this was an elder, and she stood in front of 500 people and she said, we got to warrior up. And the whole crowd went crazy. Everyone's ready for that time. Everyone wants to warrior up. Everyone wants to. Yeah, she said she has her gun ready too, so. There's like a lot of this culture of resistance that is inspiring a lot of people to stand up. And I just want to thank everybody for listening, and I know you probably have lots of questions about what the struggle in Elsie Booktook, so thanks.
Pancakes Not Pipelines. She gave a story of why that was a position that she was taking, and people want to say firearms are bad. How else are you going to catch a moose? How else are you going to catch a bear? With what the elder had stated was she's about in her, I'll say 60s to 70s, and she was talking about her grandfather who was sitting inside of his home and had brought the rifle up and sat down with it. He said, if they drag me out of my home in my territory, I'm going to kill them. And she said, it scared her. She's like, it scared me. When I was a young child, she said, it scared me because I didn't understand what it meant. She said, now that there's a threat to our water, now that there's a threat to our societies as a whole, it's not only an indigenous issue. She said, if they try to root my territory, I'm going to warrior up and I'll have my gun ready, is what she said. So that's where she was coming from. That's the stance that she's coming from. And people tend to think that we're all loving nations who are just going to smudge the oppressor away. We're going to say, okay, you can continue to beat me and I'm going to just smudge you. And pray for you. We pray for them, but yet we have the right to be able to stand up. Our cultures are warrior nations. Us on the East Coast, we met them. We had to go through the blankets. We had to go through the beating. We had to go through the oppression, the residential school. People can only put up with so much abuse before they're going to stand there and say, you know what, I'm not taking it anymore. And if you have your gun pointed at me, well, how would you feel if I pointed it back at you? You would then call me a terrorist when you're the one who pointed it first. So we have to make a stance in a smart way, in a strategical way as well. We can't all just start running out there with our guns. Because if we do that, we're all going to be deemed terrorists right off the hop. We have to be strategic in our planning and in our approaches. But also the other thing that we have noticed across all Indigenous struggles everywhere, when it's only the Indigenous people there, you get a bad beatdown. But when there's non-Indigenous people there, people who aren't of color, so the white society, if they're there, the cops aren't going to beat down because they don't want to be labeled for beating on a so-called Canadian. But for anybody else, they will be praised. Okay, you did a good job. You beat down that evil person. So it's time that we start changing the mentality of people, and we have to start creating that resistant culture of where it's acceptable to be able to stand up to the government and say, no, you're not fucking with me anymore.
Yes, I hear your stories about brutality, and it's pretty disgusting. And I'm just wondering what sort of recourse can be pursued. I mean, it seems to me that tyranny comes to your door, usually you wearing a uniform, and if these sort of characters are allowed to abuse people with impunity, it will only encourage that behavior. So, what can be done, or what recommendations do you have to suggest to make sure they do not do this with impunity?
Well, we're calling for an inquiry to be done, such as what was done during the April Wash incident, where Dudley George was killed. Because that's probably something that could have happened out there on October 17th. One of our people could have been killed because of the amount of weapons that were laid around by the RCMP, how many guns they had pointed at our heads and how many they had pointed out in the field. But one of the reasons why I don't even know the names of the officers that beat on me. I can't even tell you their faces because they were all covered up. They're dressed in camouflage where their eyes are barely showing. They have no badges on. And then they drop my charges because they know I'm going to counteract them, and I'm going to charge the officers that are all written in my disclosure. So I wasn't even able to receive my disclosure to see what officers were saying what. So it's pretty difficult.
Well, is not the fact that somebody can come towards you and incarcerate you and insult you, not identifying themselves, wearing a mask, should that not be a legal issue that should be pursued?
I believe it should be a legal issue that should be pursued, but right now, with us dealing with so much, with them still being incarcerated, our men still being incarcerated, it's kind of hard to try an avenue to try to go towards that kind of approach.
Right. I think it's big. It's not only just a native problem. We saw this in the G20 in Toronto. We see this in in Quebec. This sort of black uniform masked man being tolerated in a civil society, and it's got to stop.
I have two things. One's an answer to one of your questions, what do we do? There's not very many people in this room, and I've worked with Indigenous people around British Columbia and Alberta, and with First Nation partnerships in resource-based industries. And in those partnerships, I recognize a lot of racism regularly. So you have to stand up and speak, just like you said, if there's non-Indigenous people in the crowd, things are gentler and law and order is upheld. So we need to be and speak up for all our brothers and sisters. And then my question to you, though, is having worked with these partnerships, how do you feel about First Nation partnerships around the province of, all across Canada?
Partnerships in relation to what? With partnerships with non-Indigenous communities, you mean?
With Indigenous communities that are, like in British Columbia, forest companies, mining companies, oil companies, they create these partnerships with bands so that they can work with them.
Okay, I know what you're trying to talk about. You kind of confused me because I have a wide range of how I think of things, so I needed to get a little bit more specific, and thank you for getting a little bit more specific. When it comes to the industry coming into our territories and going up to the Indian Act elected representatives who only represent themselves, they're being coerced into signing over our title to our land. So coming at you with an academic perspective or a political perspective, I'd say there's these land claim agreements that they have all across our so-called Canada here, and where they'll have the Indigenous nations sign over comprehensive land claim agreements or specific land claim agreements, which are pursued by these corporate companies. In my territory, it was pursued by the oil company presidents who approached the chiefs, the so-called chiefs, the Indian Act elected representatives, and told them, deal with the federal and provincial government on land title issues. Deal with it, and we will fund you, and we will make sure that you have these monies to do some programs and services as a piecemeal, as to wipe your people's tears away about the oppression and colonialism that's currently happening. So they get these so-called chiefs to sign off onto these agreements, which are unconstitutional and they are illegal. But they will say at the end of the day, when the people have to get a vote, then it's legal, but the whole process is illegal. And nobody's taking a look at that. This whole process of them going into these agreements is illegal, because what's supposed to happen is from a ground-up approach, not a top-down approach where the authority is delegated by the federal and provincial government. So these Indian Act elected representatives do not represent us. All this Indigenous resurgence that you see all across Turtle Island, past Turtle Island, even into the South Americas, it's led by the Indigenous grassroots movement. It's the grassroots people, the people who do not rely on a single dollar to make sure that their people are provided for. So those are the people that are to be listened to, not these people who dress in their three-piece suits and sign agreements to abrogate and negate our people's rights, because what they're doing is unconstitutional and illegal, and they're working hand in hand with the corporations to further oppress us, just the same as the federal and provincial governments are working hand in hand to oppress us with the corporations. So it's the corporations who are running the show as puppets of the government, but they have no authority to speak on our behalf. As grassroots people, we don't demand for consultation process. That's for Indian Act elected representatives. They want a piece of paper to say, state you've been consulted with, now you can be accommodated, now you can be compensated. We don't want nothing to do with accommodation or nothing to do with compensation, because we have a firm stance that we are not to be manipulated or to be played with, because we know that we are the inheritors of these lands and these resources and this water. Because if this wasn't our land, why would the government be paying millions of dollars trying to buy it from us?
About what the current situation is with SWN, whether or not you fully fought them off, or if they're still trying to invade your territory.
They retreated several times throughout the summer, and then they retreated again in December after people probably seen it smeared all over the media. Tires burning along Route 11 for 3 consecutive days. So the company left after that. Because they want for the movement to die down and for people to stop standing up. So their plan was to not continue work until 2015, but the Premier of New Brunswick is now pushing for them to come back and to drill a test well in the spring that's coming up. So the fight is going to be more resistance, more people on the ground, and it's probably going to be probably bigger and better than it was before. So that's our stance. That it's going to be bigger, and it's going to be better, and it's going to be more badass and more hardcore. really have to watch out what you're saying when you're sending letters in. But you could, you know, you can state that Canada's a pig and they're, you know, all of this good stuff. I say it all the time. You know, I even threatened the institution. I'm like, I'm gonna sue them. You know, I put all kinds of stuff in there and how they're wrong and how it's sick and manipulated and twisted. You know, I put all this good stuff in there. They probably get a good kick out of me every now and again. But I always send in letters and yeah, they're reviewed before they get them.
Are you writing to the correctional institution or are you writing to your prisoner?
I'm writing to the correctional institution and to the prisoner, so you know, I'm just, you know, giving them some entertainment too, because you know they're reading it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I really thank you. It's very hard for me to sit here and look at my ancestors' back. Very, very tough. I have a couple of things I want to say. Well, first is so-called, and I love that phrase, and I use it all the time. And I can assure you that if there's a blockade anywhere in British Columbia, I will be there helping my native brothers and sisters. But so-called truth and reconciliation. I did some research on the word reconciliation, and it really bothers me. This is a word of oppression. I know it's very important for people to speak about their experience. People need to be educated about it. But one definition of reconciliation really, really, really cut me to the core. And this is what the definition was. Two groups of people get together and agree to share the blame. I want you to think about that. Because the blame is on my mind. It should have been called the truth and admittance commission. I'm saying that because the oppressed people with the First Nations have to admit they're not to blame. The worst thing you can have, you see this all the time. You know, women get blamed because they're being battered by their husband. They blame themselves. That's wrong. And it's just as wrong for First Nations people to blame themselves. Secondly, the governments and all of the churches and so on that have been oppressing me for so long have to admit they did wrong. They have to admit it. The friends that I have, some of them just don't get it. They don't get it. And you are such a breath of fresh air. I applaud you. Keep the battle going. You've got a lot of support up there that's not necessarily First Nation. And people won't speak up. We will be there helping you. So thank you so much for doing this extra. Keep the battle.
Not to take away from the fact that you're not Maritimers, you're from the Micmac Nation, but boy, I sure know when there's some badass Maritimers in there. I'm from New Brunswick too. I'm a colonial settler, obviously, but I just think you guys are just, not to take away from you, Connie, either, but you're just amazing, really. I'm really emotional, but you're just amazing.
Anyone else?
Right now, in terms of support, financially, we're looking at having their legal fees were all paid for. The warriors who were held as political prisoners of war, they're all paid for. but everybody else who was arrested as well because they're water protectors and they're recognized as the water protectors. So there was a separate legal defense fund set up for them. I think it's called the Water Protectors Defense Fund. It's found under GoFundMe under Charmaine Nielsen. You find it used to be Charmaine Sock who was taking care of the other fund, but she removed that account and put up a different one, and for people to find her easier because of the Elsa Bukduk, everybody knows that name now. So that's the legal defense in that terms, but we want to see more people supporting their local indigenous resistance, really, because we feel that it's really important to support those local fights and those local struggles, because the more we have people on the ground in localized areas, if we have, you think about the pipeline, these 7 pipelines that want to go through Unist'ot'en. If you have tons of people in Unist'ot'en, tons of people all along that pipeline, tons of people all along the pipeline routes that are going to go all across Canada, so-called Canada, all the way to our territory. If you have that all occupied, you know, there's the whole Occupy movement, there's a spot for you. But, you know, so if we had those, you know, instead of it being, you know, one localized area, we need to expand that. We need to explode it like fireworks and to have it be spread out all across the land. You know, have people out on the land, have people out be anti-colonial, decolonize, you know, start growing your own little gardens, and if the city don't let you, well, do it secretly. So we have to do whatever we can in whatever capacity we have to be able to, you know, help with the indigenous struggles that are happening, you know, whether it be through supporting, through getting them equipment, like say, two-way radios, getting cell phones for people, because a lot of the time we run on cell phones that are only run on minutes, where they're practically disposable, the ones you can buy at Walmart, because we're tracked so much that we can't actually have a cell phone for too long anyway, before they find out our numbers and, you know, start tracking us down and using our GPS services. So it's it gets difficult with like multimedia help, with creating propaganda, creating posters and putting it out there, and, you know, let the general public know, decolonize other people's minds, create that culture of resistance. Whatever you're passionate about, whatever entertains you, think about how you can use that as a form of resistance. You like music, well, what kind of music can be for resistance? You like posters, what kind of poster can you make for resistance? You like art, how are you going to use your art as a form of resistance? So once we able to create this culture of resistance, then everybody is going to become normal. You know, just like oppression has become normal. Well, we need to make resistance normal. We need to indigenize instead of colonialize. You know, it's about time we send that colonial train backwards.
We want to have a nation that's free and clean and for forever until the end of time. And as mothers, we can feel emotionally so connected when they damage the earth. It's like they're you know, keeping our mother. When they damage the water too, it's like they're killing your children. So when you're so emotionally attached like that, and physically attached like that, and where you feel it in your heart, in your spirit, in your soul, and then we become the frontline protectors of the water. And as the Women Warrior Society, we're the last defense. The men call us in when we're losing the battle. And traditionally, as Sukwatma women, we were called in, and we strapped our wrists with deer antlers, and we went into battle. And we, as women, we can't be scared of that. We have to know our history, and we have to have no fear and take courage, because our ancestors had no fear. They had to do what they had to do in order to defend our territories, and that's the same stance that we have to take as women. And not just Indigenous women, all women. We all know that connection when we give birth to our babies, and that connection to the universe and to the Mother Earth. We have that connection. Giving birth is one of the most powerful ceremonies out there, and that's how we connect with our nation, is through that birth ceremony. That's how we bring life into our nation, is through that birth ceremony. It's powerful, and women, we need to take up our proper role in society. This white way of thinking where the men are the ultimate decision makers is destroying our planet. And us women, we need to take back our proper role.
Yeah. With more and more, people are getting tired of governments abusing all people. And there's this growing movement called the sovereign movement. And you talked about being sovereign and not registering your children. Do you find that the sovereign movement is an ally to the cause, or do they cause harm to the cause? Because a lot of people seem to think of the government as this rightful authority, and that the sovereigns that are talking, that are not indigenous sovereigns, but the sovereign movement all across the world, that they're somehow racist, or that they're stealing from everybody because they're not recognizing the government's proper authority. Do you find that they're an ally or harm to your cause?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Well, I think I've run across a bunch of the sovereign movement people, but I believe that if you're using paperwork to say that you're sovereign, then you're not really sovereign. It's really in your spirit. You don't need paperwork or a gold stamp or anything to say that you're sovereign. And that's the way that I believe. If someone wants to say that they're sovereign, then they got to be independent in every aspect of their life and not be dependent on anyone providing anything for them. And that's what I say. I always say independence. I'm independent. I'm Sukwamo. That's who I am, because that's who we've always been. And so I know I came across the sovereign movement, and I'm sure that they use paperwork, but I just want to tell them, like, no, you don't need papers. You can just say they were sovereign.
Yeah.
Well, that about wraps it up for us here. Brianna, can I ask you to come back on stage as well? I just wanted to say that Cody, Suzanne, your words here tonight have and will continue to impact us all. And I really thank you for that. And I thank you for sharing your stories, experiences of your acts of decolonization, resistance, and resurgence for your land and for your people. Every single day that we are all alive here, it is an act of that. Every single day that we fight, defend, and survive, it makes our nation and our land stronger. And so I really thank you for that. So I have some gifts for you all here, and I think the audience as well, for coming out, for participating, for engaging, for being here with an open mind and heart. And I hope that you take as much away from this as I have. So thank you all very much for coming.
No. Okay, see you around the ranch.
Yeah, you will.
Who had cameras on?
I didn't, man.
You got audio? Good. That's excellent. Yeah, I had my camera on the whole time.
I have my